Welcome at this webinar. We are really excited to talk about Axonius today. It's one of our newest kits in our vendor list. So we're going to try to make this a little bit interactive. I know everybody's been in a lot of webinars, and it's like, you know, at the receiving end of a water hose. What you can see here is a little QR code. So let me show you what you can do with that. It's we're going to ask some questions during the webinar, and it would be nice if you can answer. The polls are totally anonymous, so you don't have to worry that we know who said what. But let me show you how that works. Let me see if I can. Could you make? I'm going to make myself presenter for a second, and let me show my phone here. So the way that this would work is, I think everybody's done QR codes, right? I just want to show you. You just scan the code, you go to the link, and what you'll see is this. It's a Slido polling app. Since we are in a security webinar today, you might not want to accept all the cookies, but I'm going to do it anyhow. And you just go to the polls, and what you will see here is that you will see a question pop up whenever I launch it. And it would be nice if you guys can answer that. So I'll kick it off with one question already, so you guys can give it a go. And this is basically, like, we were talking about asset management today. Like, you know what's on your network, so have a look at the poll and give an answer so we get some feedback from you guys. That would be really nice. So that is the polling mechanism. I'm going to give the presentation back to Lloyd. Right. So my name is Schoonaert. We have Lloyd on the call as well from Axonius. Maybe you can go to the next slide, Lloyd. So people that don't know me, I work for Exclusive Networks. I'm director of technology here in Belgium. I've been in cyber for a long time. I've always done security, and I am focusing mainly on emerging technology. So the new stuff, trying to see what new problems are out there and what newer technologies can fix that problem. Background in digital forensics, incident response, threat hunting. I think most people that are on the call that know me, I've been doing these workshops for a while on threat hunting and trainings. So what we're going to talk about today is so the agenda is we're going to explain a little bit about why is it important to have a proper asset management tool. As with most of the security stuff, people try to or like to have tools that fix a problem. Like, I need an EDR solution, or I need a sandbox, or I need a SIM, or whatever machine learning stuff that's out there nowadays. This is all being marketed and hyped. But the main question, and this is like a building block from the start, is like, do you know what's on your network? Did you have any clue, how many assets you have, or what devices, or what they're running, and so on? Because if you don't, how are you going to make those choices on what technology you need to deploy where, or überhaupt what technology you want or you need in your network? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to hand it off to Lloyd, who's going to talk a little bit. There's a bunch of slides here, and then we're going to go. This is going to be demo heavy, as most of the webinars that I get into. We like to show how it works, and I'll hand it off to Lloyd now.
Great, thank you very much, Luke. Thank you for the introduction. I didn't put together a who am I slide, but my name is Lloyd Webb. Obviously, I work for Axonius. Been with the company coming up to just almost 7 months, and really, when I was looking around the market at opportunities and companies that were doing something interesting, I normally have a couple of conditions that I look for. The first one is, is it a problem that a lot of companies have today? Is that the problem that that this company that I'm looking at is trying to solve? I also look at the the applicability and the addressable market as well. How many of our customers today have this particular problem? And so that's why I had the opportunity to choose Axonius, and sure enough, yeah, in the last 7 months I've learned an awful lot about how asset management is still an incredible problem that we're trying to solve. So what I'd like to do is just share a couple of slides, and then we're going to make this more demo heavy than slide heavy. So and feel free to put questions in the chat and that sort of stuff.
All right. Lloyd, let me interject. I'll just give a little update. we have 3 people that replied. So you lazy bastards, come on, let's get some more replies. But it's really funny. So one person already has a management solution, asset management solution. One doesn't, and the other one is looking for. So it's like completely divided over the whole line. So, and I'll launch the next poll after this one here.
Great. So what we like to start off with is this this kind of what we call snarky tweet. If snarky translates, snarky I think is just a little kind of humorous in terms of the content of the tweet, because really, if you were to ask any of your kind of colleagues internally within your company, how many Windows systems do we have? Nobody's really going to truly know. And, you go and ask lots of different people inside the company, and they're all going to have a slightly different answer. And probably the truth is probably in between one of these numbers, right? And so really what we want to do is we want to provide you an asset inventory that you can go to and ask simple questions of, like how many Windows systems do I have? And so that's really kind of the power of bringing all of your data together in one place, which we'll explain in a little while. All right, so we'll jump across.
I put a new poll in there, so you can go and have a look at that and answer the question if you would be so kind.
Give them a few seconds to answer that question. All right, so why is asset management so difficult? So if you're as old as me and Luke, you'll remember back when your networks were pretty simple and straightforward, right? I even remember before Microsoft NT came on the scene. So the networks are pretty flat. They were pretty simple. You kind of could almost walk around and count the systems that you had. But of course, over time, that complexity has kind of exploded. We introduced virtualization and hypervisors. We introduced other operating systems into the network that would add value to us. We encouraged the use of bring your own devices into the network, and so giving people the freedom to use their own systems within the network. We kind of went to next generation endpoint technologies as well. We look to kind of increase the endpoint security in our networks. We also have started moving to the cloud, especially at the moment. There's a lot of people that are moving to cloud to realize some of those cost benefits and some of those flexibility benefits of moving to the cloud. And then of course, we have all of these devices coming in and out of the network from an IoT perspective that have an IP address, and you don't know what they are, you don't know what security or what risks they're introducing into the network. You don't even know if you're scanning them from a vulnerability perspective. So all of these, kind of new systems that we've introduced over the years have really kind of added to the problem of why asset management is so difficult. But one of the key things that we say at Axonius is that you have all of the data today available to you in terms of what assets you have. It's just you've not put that data in one place where you can duplicate it and prove how many Windows systems you have. So we're not asking you to go and install another piece of technology like a scanner, like an agent, like a NAC, like a CMDB. We're basically telling you, look, install Axonius, connect it into all of these systems that you might have already in the network, and we'll tell you and give you an accurate view of the assets that you have within your environment. All right. So once you've kind of built that asset inventory and you've, if you like, uncovered what you have in the network by connecting into your various different systems, we want to kind of help you surface some problems, right? So how would you today answer the question, where is my endpoint security control? Is it fully deployed? I've paid for 10,000 licenses. Have I deployed 10,000 agents to my production systems? Today, asking that question is quite a difficult thing to answer, right? You have to compare and contrast. You might kind of maybe run a PowerShell command to export your Active Directory, put it into a spreadsheet, create a pivot table, do the same with CrowdStrike or whatever endpoint control you're using. You might compare the two systems together, right? Okay, so I've got 9,000 systems in CrowdStrike, I've got 10,000 in Active Directory, I'm missing some agents in terms of where they should be installed. So that's one of the types of problems that we want to help you with at Axonius, that ability to be able to compare and contrast your data sources to understand where you have security gaps in the network.
So Lloyd, just a little result on the last poll on basically asking, do you guys have any idea on what's on your network? We have unanimous like a no on that, which goes to my point. It's kind of relevant to know that in order to take certain decisions. So I'll
yeah, and a little anecdote that that Patrick, my colleague, and I discovered last week. So we were talking to a large prospect in Ireland, and they were literally, there was a big team of them on the call. They were talking between themselves in terms of the problem that they have with asset management. And this is a big company that is responsible for some pretty critical infrastructure. And they were saying, look, we get 100 incidents a year, and sometimes those incidents can take 5 days to track down exactly what happened. But a quarter of that time is spent just trying to find out where the asset is, who owns it, what software is it running, what type of system is it. It's purely an asset management problem that they spend a quarter of their time trying to achieve when they're investigating those incidents. If we could cut out a quarter of that time across those 100 incidents, that's an awful lot of a cost saving that can be had. So one of the other types of questions that customers are really interested in is kind of not only what's on my network, but what's on my network that I don't recognize, and it could be classed as a rogue device, it could be classed as an unmanaged device. But this is another type of problem that we want to help you with. If we can connect in to the relevant data sources from our tool, we'll show you where you have unmanaged devices in the network that possibly shouldn't be there. And across all the POCs that I've done in the last 7 months, there's always something interesting that we find. Whether it's a Peloton bike, I've got one here in my office. Whether it's a Raspberry Pi, I've got a couple of Raspberry Pis inside my network too. But we find really weird things in people's enterprise networks that they didn't know were there. And so that's kind of the power of Axonius. So, and like I said, a lot of people are almost fully migrated to cloud. In fact, I spoke to a customer recently that were 100% AWS. It kind of shocked me a little bit, but it's happening. And so when you go to the cloud, obviously there's tons of benefits, but there's also this kind of dynamic nature to it. Whether you're leveraging container-based security, whether you're just growing and contracting as demand increases and shrinks. But you literally are potentially starting systems that have vulnerabilities. So wouldn't you like to know that the systems that you're starting, are known to your vulnerability scanner, right? You know what vulnerabilities they potentially have. And so that kind of dynamic nature to cloud and knowing that you're not starting systems that have inherent vulnerabilities, that's again something that we want to help you with at Axonius. All right. So, like I said a little while ago, is that we're not asking you to install a piece of technology that is going to, if you like, cause a major impact to you from we're not asking you to install an agent, we're not asking you to install another scanner, we're not asking you to install another sniffer. Now, basically we're saying you have the data available to you today, and what you need is a system to bring it all together in one place, an aggregator. Okay, so that's kind of the beauty of if you like, the architecture of what we do at Axonius. So, and once we've got all of that data in one place, it allows us to kind of ask these kind of interesting questions. Are my assets known? Where are they? What is it running? Is the software up to date? Is it running my latest and greatest kind of endpoint security control? Is it adhering to my policies? So these are the types of things that we want to help you with once we get access to that data. All right, so coming to the end of the slides, and we'll jump into the demo. We've got about 25-30 minutes left in terms of the content. So the three main functions of the Axonius tool. The first and foremost is to acquire a comprehensive asset inventory. So what we ask of you as a customer is that you connect to what we call your technology, and we call it an adapter. So an adapter effectively for us is effectively like an API client. We're going to communicate with all of your current technology via API, and we're going to retrieve the asset relevant data over an API connection, right? So it's a pretty lightweight connection. We're literally just taking a read-only connection into your data sources. We're going to obtain the asset relevant data. We're going to normalize that data into our data model. We're going to aggregate it and correlate it, and we're going to basically tie it together with all the other data sources. So if we see, you've got 5 adapters connected, and we see an asset that exists in those 5 different adapters, those 5 different data sources, we're going to tie it together as one unique asset inside our system. Okay, so you get like a multi-dimensional view of the assets that we acquire via this discovery mechanism. All right, so we'll do that on a regular basis. So once we've configured those adapters, and we've got almost 300 available to us now, once we've configured those adapters on a discovery cycle basis, we'll reach in and pull out the latest and greatest asset relevant data. All right, that's first and foremost what we do as part of the tool, and that's a symptom of connecting into those tools that you already have in the network today.
So talking about tools, I just launched a new poll. Just like how many kind of security tools do you have in your network? So that poll is up now.
That'll be an interesting one for sure. Yeah, we've got customers that have connected 20 or 30 adapters, right? So, and the more third-party technology that you connect to from an Axonius perspective, the better visibility you get on your assets. We'll show that as part of the demo. So once we've acquired that data and we know what assets you have, and we've correlated and aggregated that data in one place, then we want to be able to use this thing called the query wizard to be able to compare and contrast the data, right? So here we've got a screenshot that shows, show me everything that exists in Active Directory, show me everything that exists in VMware, but show me the things that are missing my CrowdStrike agent, right? So not CrowdStrike. So that's just a really simple query that you can use inside your environment. It doesn't have to be CrowdStrike, it doesn't have to be VMware. You basically choose what adapters you've connected to surface those security conditions. Excuse me. And then once you surface those security conditions, the next part of the product is really kind of to do something about those problems, right? So whether it's just a notification, whether it's creation of a ticket, whether it's adding those IP addresses that you've discovered as part of that query to the next vulnerability scan, whether it's fixing a CMDB entry. You might already have a CMDB today that you think it's okay, but it's not perfect. We can help make it perfect. We can actually find the problems in your CMDB and help correct them using the enforcement center. So this is another part of the product that allows us to take those pre-saved queries that we've just built, and every time there is a discovery cycle, we can then look to enforce and do something about that data that we find as part of that query. All right, so that's the three main parts of the product. In terms of architecture, go ahead.
Sorry, Lloyd. So some results on the last one about how many unique security solutions people have. So the majority, about 70%, is between 6 and 10, and then there's another 20% that is 11 to 15, and then another 20% 16 or more. So we see that people typically have around, the ones in the call here that replied, around 10 solutions. And just speaking from our own experience, when we deployed Axonius in our lab environment, I think we hooked up 7 or 8 different solutions, going from Palo Alto, Fortinet, Sentinel-1, F5, Infoblox, our Nutanix clusters, our AWS and Azure clouds, and I think we were kind of up and running within an hour. It's very, very, very easy to deploy. Like you mentioned, you just need to know where is my Infoblox, or where's my Palo Alto, or what's the link to my AWS API, and you need then the credentials or your API keys. And that was really a breeze to set up. So pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's one of the real kind of beauties of the product, in that we can issue you an OVA, and that OVA will we pretty much run on most hypervisors. You can even run in the cloud if you wanted to. I've got some customers at the moment that are running in Azure. We've got customers that run in AWS. So you decide where you want to put the virtual machine, as long as it has connectivity to the data sources, by that concept of the adapter that I mentioned. So effectively, we're agentless. We're just going to reach in, from a read-only perspective to those adapters and pull out the asset data. And of course, the more dynamic customers that I've worked with in the last couple of months, can pretty much get up and running in the first day. Depending on how many assets they have and how much the discovery cycle might take. If you've got, for example, a huge kind of vulnerability assessment environment, you've got lots of data in your vulnerability scanner, that can sometimes take an hour or two to retrieve over the API, because some APIs are faster than others. But depending on the size of the environment, definitely sub 10,000 assets, you can pretty much get deployed in a day quite easily. All right. So, and then just to kind of finish up before we jump into the demo, we've got probably 20 minutes left for the demo. These are some of the use cases that customers come to us to help try and solve. Okay, so just wanted to throw this in there just to kind of give you an idea of the types of things that we try and solve with the tool that we have at Axonius. All right, so let's stop sharing my screen and we're going to reshare a different screen.
Yeah, I put a final poll up here, guys, just to see, like, within your environment, who you think would benefit the most from having, you know, a knowledge of what assets and what they're running and where they are. So if you have a moment, take some time to vote on that one, and then we are done with the polls. I promise.
Oh, well, thank you for that. All right, so you can see my browser now. So I've jumped into one of our demo systems, and you're looking at, you know, the main dashboard associated with the data that we've acquired on this demo system. Okay, and so there's, you know, some familiar icons here for all of you. I'm sure there's some things here you're like, oh, what's that? That looks like Titanium. That looks like ServiceNow, some AWS, some G Suite, some Trend, some Fortinet. You know, some familiar systems here that you'll recognize. And what we've effectively done, right, you know, via the adapter technology is we've, you know, communicated over API to these systems, and we've pulled out the device-related data in these systems. We've also pulled out user-related data if they do have users associated with those adapters. And basically, we've gone through a process of deduplication. So you can see in ServiceNow, there's quite a few duplicates. We went from 917, if you like, device-related assets, and after deduplication, we said there's actually 618 unique devices in there. So we've deduplicated each of the information sources, and we've done that across all the adapters that are configured, you know, and we've arrived at that 2,587 from a unique asset count. Okay, and we've obviously done a similar across our user data as well. All right, so
yeah, let's talk. I might want to add something here that I threw it in the chat as well, or one of the questions. This is a discussion we have over and over and over when we talk about licensing. So regardless of security consequences, but licensing is like we talk to a customer, they want to choose a certain security solution, and then it's either licensed user-based or device-based. And then you get into all these discussions about what's a user and do these accounts matter? And I don't know if I have all my accounts. Maybe I'm, you know, paying too much. And same thing for devices is even more of a problem. So that's one of these things, like this is a one source of truth, right? You exactly know what's on the network and correlate it from different sources. So you don't, you know, you're pretty sure that that number that you see there is accurate, and it's not just from, you know, from your AD, or it's not just from, you know, your IP address management solution. It's everything that there is. So
it's a good point. The more adapters you add, the closer you get to the truth. But, you know, you're not relying on one data source for, you know, some data. You know, you might be surprised, but some data sources, you know, actually don't have particularly great data. So you might want to say, well, actually, you know, we're going to, you know, limit the use of that particular adapter in certain scenarios because it might not be the most trustworthy. But by having a quorum of data across lots of different adapters, we can actually make some decisions for you in terms of what is the best version of data as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So first thing that we would do as part of any kind of configuration, obviously we'd, you know, start off with the journey, you know, where your data first makes its journey inside our tool. It's via this adapter technology, right? So what we basically go and do, you can see here we've got 42 configured here. This is probably a little unusual for most systems. We probably generally get between 10 and 30 possibly. But we've got 42 configured here, but obviously it's a demo system. So basically what we've done in here, we've said, okay, from an Amazon perspective, you know, we've added a connection. Within this connection, it tells us, you know, where to get access to this data from a region perspective, what API keys to use in here, you know, and I can also click on this kind of help over here to kind of, you know, direct me in terms of what type of credential I need, what type of role and permissions I need to get access to this data in AWS. And so we configure that, we hit save and fetch, and then we start fetching Amazon data, okay? Within the advanced settings, we can actually adjust how far back we want to go for data in terms of the time and the relevancy of that data. We can also adjust, you know, what do we want to do with the various different parts of the Amazon data as well. You know, so for example, if you're heavily into Kubernetes or container-based systems, you can decide whether I want to treat them separately inside my asset inventory, right? So I can correlate them to their EC2 instances. You decide within the configuration of AWS. And so we would, work with you as a customer. We'd identify all of your data sources. We'd obviously, and I can never type when somebody's watching it, we'd obviously look to the various different Microsoft systems that we might want to connect. We definitely want to connect to Active Directory. If you've got something like an SCCM or another tool that provides you with, if you like, endpoint management in terms of what's installed and patch management, we definitely want to connect into those. So SCCM is a popular one for us. We definitely want to connect into some form of network data source as well. That's going to give us that unmanaged capability, that ability to look for things that only appear on the network. So we definitely want to connect to some form of network infrastructure, whether it's Fortinet, whether it's Palo Alto. We definitely want to pick on your endpoint security controls, whether it's CrowdStrike, whether it's SentinelOne, whether it's Cylance. We don't mind. We've got adapters for all sorts of technology. And if you like, the best way to configure our tool is to give us lots of diverse sets of adapters, not just all the same. So don't just focus on your endpoint systems. Have something from your network, have something from your vulnerability scanner, have something from your directory services. Have a broad set of category of adapter to configure.
So a very good source typically on network is your DNS DHCP, like your info blocks, for example, or your wireless access points. What's also interesting, of course, like you mentioned, is on the endpoint, which we will see later on. So the mix of those things is definitely important. But what we saw, like just having 6 or 7 of those, we got a pretty accurate view of what's going on. By the way, I didn't mention it in the beginning, but if there are any questions, just throw them in the questions box, and I will try to answer them. We will also do some questions at the end. And on the poll about who do you think would actually benefit from a solution like this, 90% of people say, well, basically everybody in my environment would benefit from a solution like this. So I think it's pretty clear. There's a lot of use cases for this.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. You'll do a POC and we get to the end of the 30-day POC window, and people don't want to give it up. They don't want to give up the tool at the end of the window, which it's sticky and it's like almost addictive. You see customers that say, well, we're only going to add 6 adapters, and then suddenly you log in and you're like, oh, I've added another 4. So it's almost like that. Once they start adding adapters and they start getting a taste of the kind of content that's being retrieved over those adapter connections, they just want to add more and more connectivity and adapters to the system. All right, so one of the things I didn't cover was so what happens if we don't have an adapter? All right, so in fact, I've got an example at the moment in a POC, and we're actually going to use the SQL adapter, right? We're just going to get the schema for the database and the table, and we're going to import the data straight out the SQL server. There's even getting if you want to get the data in from a spreadsheet, right? You can have a CSV stored on a network share. As long as it comes in a specific kind of structure in terms of column headings, we can import, flat data from a CSV. You can even, import some data from a JSON adapter as well. So there's other ways of getting access to your data if we don't have an adapter. But the good thing is that, since I've joined, we've probably added like almost 150 adapters, in probably 7 months. It's just ridiculous. So literally every probably month or so, there's probably another 10 or so adapters that we've added, mostly based on customer demand. So, if you ever do become a customer, we would, look to work with you to understand what adapters we're missing and work with you to have those implemented for you free of charge as well. So once we've connected into all the adapters, then basically the key thing to know is that we do that discovery cycle on a scheduled basis, right? So we can actually run each adapter on its own schedule. We could say, well, Amazon AWS data, it's changing more often, so therefore maybe I want to make it, a discovery cycle that that occurs, less than once a day. What we also do as part of the discovery cycle is we take a historical snapshot of the database, right? So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and just demonstrate that. So if I go to my devices section here, here's my 2,587 unique devices. So every row here is an asset that's been correlated with all of the technology that's associated with those assets. And up here we have a date field, right? So I can go backwards in time. So at the moment we're at 2587. I can go backwards in time. Let's try the 1st of October. There we go. So 2611 was the volume of assets, the unique assets that we had on the 1st of October. So wherever you have a snapshot of your database, you can effectively go backwards in time and say, what did my inventory look like back on the 7th of September, right? And this is a full inventory, right? This is everything that you'd see today in the data you can see back on the 7th of September, right? So that's the beauty of having that historical snapshot capability. So think of the use cases, maybe there's somebody sat in the SOC, they're investigating an alert, that the alert was 2 days ago or a week ago. They can go backwards in time using this tool to understand what did that system look like on that day. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the data that we've acquired for these assets. So this is one unique asset inside the environment, okay? And we can see all of the data that we've acquired across the various different adapters for this particular system, okay? So what we've done is we've reached in and said, give me all the data that you have with regards to devices. When we've pulled that back, we've said, oh, actually, Silence has seen this particular host name. It also matches a similar host name to Kaseya. We can also see it in Active Directory as this host name, and we're going to start to merge it all together. So we acquire the data, we normalize it because each vendor calls these things different things. So we normalize it into our data model, and then we start to correlate it together as one unique asset. And we're looking for things that overlap across these adapters, right? So maybe it could be, the distinguished name for the Active Directory system. It could be, the MAC address on Silence, for example. It could be, the MAC address and the serial number for AWS. There's multiple, if you like, data points that we use to tie these assets together as one system. So once we've got access to this data, all of these fields are things that you can query, right? So we can build a query around, for example, show me all my Silence agent versions that are equal to 1490, but also, exist in Active Directory as a Windows Server 2012, for example. We can build a query to identify those conditions, and we can just keep adding conditions on top. Every time you see a bolded section here, they're all things that we can put into the query tool, all right? So that's all the adaptive view of those assets. We also have an aggregated view of that asset. So where we have similar data, we basically lump it all together, we merge it all together in one place, because you really might want to search, for example, across all of the installed software. So maybe Kaseya has given us installed software here, but maybe there's an SCCM installed as well. Maybe there's an Ivanti, maybe there's a managed engine, maybe there's an SSM agent for AWS that's giving us installed software. And so all of the installed software appears here, right, across all of the adapters. So we can then build queries across all of this aggregated data. The same goes for vulnerable software. At the moment, we're just using our own vulnerability tool, which is a NIST vulnerability database, to measure the installed software against the vulnerabilities. But if you had a Tenable SC, you had a Qualys, you had Rapid7, all that Rapid7 data would appear here, as well as any other vulnerability data that you've acquired. So it gives you one, if you like, aggregated view of your assets that you can then build queries around. All right, so that's what we do with each individual kind of asset, right? So let's spend maybe 5 minutes just looking at some interesting queries, right? So maybe the first thing you might want to do, going back to that, that particular tweet that we had, maybe we want to go and find out, how many Windows systems do I have? Okay, 505, right? So just think back to all of those different answers that you got from those different departments as part of that tweet slide. Literally, within less than a second, we've identified all of the Windows systems in this particular inventory, and that's how quick it was. The database, queries are extremely fast in our tool, regardless if you have 2,500 assets or 10,000 assets or 500,000. It's an extremely fast way of querying this data. What you also might want to say is, well, actually, maybe just show me the systems that that exist in my Active Directory. All right, maybe I really want to know kind of how that compares to my CrowdStrike data. All right, so I've now got 8 systems over here that have that are known as Windows systems that exist in Active Directory, but also exist and are known to CrowdStrike. All right, so where am I missing my CrowdStrike agent? Well, if I hit the Not button here, I've got 15 systems here that are not known to my CrowdStrike. So there we go. There's a query there that we've identified as a security condition. We've used the data that we've acquired through the discovery process, and we're now surfacing those security conditions in your data. All right, and then there are other things that you might want to start to build on top. So if you think back to all of that data that we acquired, there's lots of other things in here that I could query for. So maybe I want to pick on maybe it has to exist in VMware, for example. I can see there's some VMware hosts here. Maybe I also want to pick out maybe if it's turned on, or when we last discovered that system, was it available and turned on? Let's check that. Okay, they were all turned off at the time of the last discovery. So that's the ability to go and look for the power state as well. One of the other interesting things that I want to show you is that we have this ability to look for how fresh that asset data is within our database and within the source systems as well. So basically here we've got a query that says show me all my Windows systems, and we basically pull in this field and we normalize this field called last seen. So each data source has a concept of, if you like, when was the system last seen in that data source? So what we do is we aggregate it all together. This is, if you like, the aggregated view of all of the data associated from a last seen perspective. So what does this allow us to do? As you can see here, we've actually got some problems here. We've got some issues within our service now, in our Active Directory, and in our silence data, right? Silence thinks it hasn't seen this particular asset in over 150 days. But from an AWS perspective, it's been seen today. From a Tanium perspective, it's been seen today. So we have something broken there. So we can use those last seen values, if you like, to compare and contrast our data. So let's just clear this out a second and build another query. So we're going to use that aggregated last seen value to say, well, I want to know about my systems that have been seen, in the last week, for example. But I want to see, have I got any broken agents, right? So have I got any silence agents that have not been seen for a while? So let's put in the last seen, and we're actually going to use this not value, and I'll explain why in a second. So basically what we're going to say here is we want to see agents that have not been seen by silence in the last year. Okay, so let's go and have a look at that last seen value. So really, this particular agent is well and truly broken, because if we look at all the last seen values, you can see here 532 days since silence saw that particular agent. So this is important because from a security perspective, you want to know that if you've deployed CrowdStrike, you've deployed McAfee or whatever AV you're using, you want to know that it's actually working and it's checking in. It's getting the latest versions of the agent. It's getting the latest policies for the agent. It's an important security check in terms of policy adherence. And then, of course, you can also, if I clear this all out, you can also decide to look for versions of things. So let's take the CrowdStrike agent again. So we'll go CrowdStrike agent version, and we can actually pick particular agent versions. And I know there's a new one that's just come out called 6.11. All right, so now I've identified my 6 systems that are on 6.11 of the agent version, which is the latest. I can say, well, show me the ones that are not on the latest, right? So we can then go and pick on one of these systems. We can go and have a look at the aggregated data to pull out the agent version. And there we go, 5.34. So again, from a compliance perspective, you want to prove that everybody's getting the latest and greatest agent versions. Of course, it's not just agent versions, it's any piece of data that is acquired via those adapter connections. From a CrowdStrike perspective, I could have picked out anything. I could say, well, it has to be, I don't know, it has to be, maybe it has to be, I don't know, type and distribution Windows Server 2016 as well. So I can use that aggregated view of the world to give us, if you like, what does everybody think of this data from an adapter perspective, or I can use those individual bits of data that we acquire via these adapter connections as well. So
Lloyd, just a question. So these queries, you can actually you can save them and can you schedule them?
Good question. That's whilst we've got a few more minutes, that's exactly where I'd like to take you. So once you've surfaced those security conditions, then you want to save them, and then you want to maybe do something about those particular problems, right? So we can add this concept of an enforcement. We can say, well, using that query that we just found, maybe the missing CrowdStrike agents, I'm going to go notify somebody. I'm going to do it as part of my discovery cycle. So every time that query is, every time the discovery cycle takes place, query is ran, if we find any new data as part of that query, we then want to do something about it. So we have all of these actions. Again, this is part of our kind of extensible framework. We're adding to these actions all the time. We might want to create a ticket in ServiceNow. We might just want to tag the device. We might want to do something with an online enrichment source. Like I mentioned earlier, we might want to go and fix the CMDB entry. We might want to go and add that IP address to a vulnerability scan. We could even go and push down a command, right? We could even go and push down a package as well. So this is that ability to go and take that saved query and then do something with it. And then if you like, just to kind of try and save a couple of minutes for the end, all of those saved queries are then used to, if you like, visualize your data, right? So you might have a team that is responsible for security. They have their own dashboard in here. Then you might have a team that's responsible for Unix and Linux devices. They have their own dashboard in here. And of course, you don't have to rely on our dashboard. You can actually just rely on us as an API data source. Right? So you've acquired and aggregated, correlated all that data in one place. You might never touch our UI ever again. You might just say, I'm going to retrieve all of that data, put it into my Tableau, into my Power BI. That is going to be my, if you like, my data display engine. But Axonius is the aggregator of all of that data.
So this would be a good example, I think, if you have a SIM or something in your environment where you could this would be your own internal threat intelligence, right? Where you say, like, when I see events coming in, reach out to Axonius and enrich my logs with certain information that my responders are going to need in order to have more context around a certain raw log event, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of customers now, actually Splunk customers, but they're actually using our API to go and, like you say, enrich a particular entry inside their SIM, because we have more data than they have in their log entries. So I'm just conscious of time. A couple of minutes left.
Okay, I have some questions here, Lloyd. Do you want to take them at the end, or you want to do them now?
Well, let's do them now. I think if everybody's happy, that's a short demo that I'd like to show everybody, and yeah, let's take some questions.
So I have one question that says, what do you do if you don't have an adapter for a data source?
Yeah, so that's goes a little bit back to what we described. We can either acquire data via some other standard way, whether it's SQL Server, whether it's CSV. But when you become a customer, if there's an adapter that you'd love for us to have, we'd work with you to get the API documentation to understand what data is available as part of that API. And as long as it's good asset relevant data, there's pretty much a 99% chance that we'll add it for you free of charge.
Yeah, I went through our own portfolio at Exclusive, and I think everything is covered there. I mean, like things from Forescout or SentinelOne, Infoblox, and the firewalls that we ran Palo Alto for, F5. Everything was covered, so there might be some exotic things there. But another question here is like, well, I already have a CMDB, so why would I need Axonius?
Yes, good one. So a lot of customers have invested a lot in their CMDB infrastructure. What we find, though, is it's still not quite where it could be in terms of accuracy. So for us, a CMDB is a really good source of data. But if you trust just one source of data, then you're going to come unstuck. And we find often that, especially in ServiceNow, it seems to be ServiceNow environments, that we'll acquire ServiceNow data, and we'll find that there's fields that have been configured for those assets in ServiceNow that are not actually true. For example, there's a field called install status in ServiceNow, and we've often found data inside our tool, once we've acquired the ServiceNow data, that says disposed of. Okay, and why is that important? Well, it's not disposed of because we can see it in Tanium, we can see it in Active Directory, we can see it in Qualys. It's still in the network. It's not disposed of, and so we're finding that while CMDBs are useful, they're never perfect. And so by bringing together lots of different data sources, you really get a quorum in terms of things that you can trust.
Okay, and maybe linked to that, who would you then consider competition?
Yeah, so I guess traditionally, you have technology around scanners, agent-based technology. You have obviously CMDB type technology, but for us, they're just good data sources, right? They're just things that we can acquire data from, and and treat that as part of the overall kind of trustworthiness of all the adapters that we've configured. So there isn't anyone in particular doing what we do and how we do it right now, but I'm sure we'll start to see people kind of jumping onto this concept pretty soon.
Okay, and a last one, and you might already have mentioned that, but how can I use Axonius, or can Axonius be used to help me find like rogue or unmanaged devices in my network?
Sure. So basically, once we've acquired network-related data, I'll show you this quickly. What we can actually do is we can start to isolate that data, right? So we can say, well, actually, I'm only interested in my network-related data. So we can say, well, let's just isolate the Fortinet data in here, and then we basically get to look at what's unmanaged, all right? And then we can enrich that by adding different columns in here. We could say, well, actually, I'm really interested in what the MAC manufacturer is, not just the MAC address, but the actual manufacturer behind that MAC address. All right, and then what we can also do in here, we can say, well, maybe we actually want to also know, what interface that particular data is coming from within Fortinet. So we get to, if you like, look at your network from a different viewpoint, and then we can see, well, actually, okay, I can see this data's coming in on my LAN switch. I've got people coming from Zoom rooms. You can then start to query that data and start to isolate some of those manufacturers in terms of the ones that you trust and the ones that you know to be that should be there on the network rather than shouldn't be there. So, for example, we can isolate the VMware and then get rid of the VMware by saying not. And so you build a query to start identifying some of the suspicious systems on the network.
All right. I think that was all the questions. If there's anything else, it's now the time. I think we're going to close down now. We will be reaching out after the webinar with an email, probably with a recording and some other materials. As always, if there are more questions, we can just drop me a mail. We'll get in touch with you and set up a session one-to-one if you like. But for now, I think we are done, right?
Great. Appreciate your time, everybody.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining, and we'll see you soon again.